On December 20th, 2025, history quietly but decisively turned a corner in Bamako. No fireworks, no grand speeches for outsiders. Just a moment Africans have waited generations to witness. Three Sahel nations stood together and did something few believed possible. They activated a unified military force built, funded, and commanded by Africans alone. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger did not announce an idea or a future plan. They launched a reality. Soldiers from the three nations marched under a single command structure, sharing intelligence, logistics, and responsibility. This was not symbolic cooperation. This was operational unity. The force carries a name that already echoes across the Sahel, the unified force of the Alliance of Sahel States, known as AES. Its 1st Battalion is already deployed. Its mission is clear: protect Sahelian lives, defend Sahelian territory, and secure a Sahelian future. This moment did not arrive
For
overnight.
decades, the Sahel has endured relentless insecurity. Armed extremist groups exploited borders that existed on maps but not on the ground. Villages were attacked, supply routes cut, communities displaced. Soldiers fought with courage but often without coordination, without sufficient resources, and without a unified regional strategy. What changed was not the threat. What changed was the response. Rather than facing the challenge separately, these three nations chose collective defense, not as a slogan, but as a system. Shared command, shared intelligence, shared responsibility. At the ceremony in Bamako, the ceremonial standard of the AES was handed to the 1st Battalion. These were not ceremonial troops. They were experienced soldiers drawn from each country, selected for combat readiness, regional knowledge, and operational discipline. This battalion represents the best of what the Sahel can field when its nations act together. Behind this force is a generation of leaders shaped not by theory, but by experience. Among them is Ibrahim Traoré, whose rise reflected a broader shift across the region. A generation that grew up witnessing resource wealth leave their soil while communities remained vulnerable. A generation determined to reverse that pattern. The AES strategy rests on a simple principle: security and sovereignty are inseparable. A nation cannot protect its people if it cannot control its resources. And it cannot control its resources if it depends entirely on external financing for survival. This realization triggered a deeper transformation. Across the Sahel, governments began reassessing how their natural wealth was managed. Gold, uranium, agricultural potential, and transit corridors were no longer viewed as commodities to be exported raw and cheap, but as foundations for national strength. Revenue that once vanished abroad began circulating locally. Mining operations were restructured. Refineries were developed. Strategic reserves were built. For the first time in decades, defense budgets were funded not by loans or conditions, but by national wealth. This financial independence changed everything. With stable funding, procurement followed strategy, not dependency. Equipment arrived based on operational needs. Training aligned with terrain realities. Air, land, and intelligence assets were integrated into a single regional system. Cargo planes began landing regularly in Bamako, Ouagadougou, and Niamey. Not as emergency relief, but as scheduled logistics. Armored vehicles designed for desert warfare. Surveillance drones capable of real-time monitoring. Air defense systems protecting sovereign airspace, secure communications linking commands across borders. The AES force now operates with eyes in the sky and coordination on the ground. One incident made this shift unmistakably clear. When an unauthorized military aircraft entered Sahelian airspace, it was detected, intercepted, and addressed through diplomatic and security channels. No confusion, no panic, just enforcement of sovereignty. The message was calm but firm. Airspace, borders, and security are now actively monitored. This level of coordination would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. But the true test of any military alliance is not equipment or parades. It is results. Those results became visible during a major fuel crisis targeting Bamako. Armed groups attempted to choke the capital by attacking fuel convoys, disrupting supply lines, and creating shortages that threatened hospitals, transportation, and basic services. The objective was pressure through scarcity. The response revealed the power of unity. From Niger, massive fuel convoys were assembled. From Burkina Faso, escort units were deployed. From Mali, intelligence and route clearance teams coordinated the operation. This was not a delivery. It was a joint military maneuver. The convoys moved through hostile zones across hundreds of kilometers under constant threat. Ambush attempts were detected early. Explosive devices were neutralized. Escort units maintained formation. Every tanker reached its destination. Bamako's fuel flow resumed. The siege collapsed. That operation alone demonstrated what the AES represents in practice: shared risk, shared protection, shared success. Since mid-2024, similar operations have taken place across border regions once considered ungovernable. Joint patrols now move seamlessly across national lines. Intelligence is pooled, not siloed. Targets are tracked regionally, not locally. Several high-profile armed group leaders have been neutralized. Supply routes once dominated by militants are reopening. Communities that lived under fear are seeing consistent security presence for the first time in years. Leading the unified command are officers shaped by frontline experience, not conference rooms. They understand what it means to operate with limited resources, to wait for support that never arrives, and to face threats that do not respect borders. That memory informs every decision. Equally important is the psychological shift among soldiers. When a soldier knows equipment will arrive, backup will come, and his sacrifice matters to his own people, morale changes. When that soldier knows reinforcements may arrive not just from his country, but from a neighboring nation standing with him, confidence grows. This is not abstract. It shows in patrol discipline, in operational tempo, in battlefield initiative. The AES is also reshaping economics. Rather than exporting raw materials and importing finished products at inflated costs, Sahel nations are building processing capacity. Gold is refined domestically. Strategic reserves are stored regionally. Agricultural programs are funded locally. Infrastructure supports both civilian life and security mobility. This economic foundation reinforces military independence. And beyond the Sahel, other African nations are watching closely. Not because they seek conflict, but because they see possibility. They see nations deciding their own priorities, choosing partners based on mutual benefit, funding security with national resources, coordinating regionally without surrendering sovereignty. This is not about ideology. It is about agency. The AES is not perfect. Challenges remain. Armed groups adapt. Terrain is unforgiving. Losses occur. No one claims otherwise, but the difference is direction, momentum, ownership. For the first time in generations, Sahelian security is being shaped in Bamako, Ouagadougou, and Niamey, not elsewhere.
December 20th, 2025 matters because it marked the end of waiting. The 1st Battalion is operational. More units are training. Equipment continues to arrive. Coordination deepens daily. The Sahel is no longer reacting. It is shaping outcomes. Across the region, citizens are noticing something subtle but powerful. Stability is no longer promised. It is being built. Communities are reopening markets. Transport routes are recovering. Investment discussions are returning. Hope, once rare, is reappearing. Africa's resources were always there. Africa's soldiers were always capable. Africa's vision was never absent. What was required was alignment of will, leadership, and purpose. The Alliance of Sahel States has provided that alignment, and as this unified force continues to mature, its impact may extend far beyond the Sahel. It offers a living example of what African cooperation can achieve when driven by shared interest rather than external expectation. One force. Three sovereign nations, a continent watching. This is not the end of the struggle. It is the beginning of self-directed security, and the Sahel is no longer waiting for permission to protect itself.